Sam Ansel presents Where I Belong. The day I stopped lying to myself was the day everything started working. Chapter 1. The Whisper That Follows You. There's a whisper that's followed me for as long as I can remember. Not a loud voice. Not even a complete sentence. Just a feeling. Like walking into a room and knowing, or thinking I knew, that I wasn't supposed to be there. Not because someone said it. Not because anyone looked at me strangely. But because something inside me was already rehearsing my exit before I even arrived. When I was a kid, I used to watch other children play from the edge of the field. They didn't push me away. They didn't even see me. And still, I took that as a sign. A sign that I didn't belong. And so, I built a talent. Not the kind that wins trophies. A silent skill. The ability to disappear without ever having been fully present. I'd enter a conversation and start calculating how to leave without anyone noticing. I'd sit at a table and wonder if I was stealing someone else's chair. I'd laugh at a joke, then immediately regret it. Thinking maybe I wasn't allowed to laugh too loud. This feeling. It wasn't a wound. It was a background noise. Like a hum behind every song. A whisper that told me, "Careful. You're not really invited." Years passed. Different towns. Different people. Same whisper. Sometimes I thought I was just being humble. But humility doesn't shrink you until you forget your own shape. This was something else. A fear of taking up space. The fear of being the one that people talk about when you leave the room. The fear of being too much, just by being real. So I mastered the art of softening myself. Of making myself easy to ignore. But lately, something started to crack. Not in a dramatic way. No breakdowns. No screams. Just a moment. A single moment. I was playing music at a small park. Nothing big. Just me, my guitar, and the same whisper saying, "You're bothering them." Halfway through the second song, I packed up and left. No one stopped me. Which, of course, confirmed the whisper. At least I thought it did. 2 days later, I was buying bread when I heard a voice behind me. "Hey, weren't you the guy playing guitar at the park?" It was one of the girls from the group. The same group I was sure had laughed at me. She smiled and said, "You made our day. We were talking about how peaceful your voice was." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her I had left early because I thought they were annoyed. But I just nodded. And smiled back. And right there, in that moment, the whisper lost some of its power. It didn't disappear completely. But for the first time, I questioned it. What if I was never the problem? What if I had been welcome all along? But I trained myself not to believe it? That question is where this story really begins. Chapter 2. Laughing Girls and Wrong Assumptions. After that day in the bakery, I couldn't stop thinking about how wrong I had been. It wasn't just that one time. I started remembering other moments. Dozens of them. Where I walked away too soon. Moments I interpreted as rejection. But maybe they were just people being people. There was a party I went to in college. I didn't know many people. So I leaned against the wall, drink in hand. Pretending to be okay with solitude. 2 girls were laughing nearby. I had just made a small comment to them, something harmless. They laughed seconds later. I was sure it was about me. That I'd said something wrong. That I had embarrassed myself. So I left. Of course. I always left. But now, I wonder, what if they were laughing about something else entirely? What if they thought I was funny in a good way? What if I had stayed, smiled, and just let things be light? Memory is a tricky thing. It doesn't just show you the past. It shows you what you believed about yourself at the time. And I believed I didn't deserve to be there. That people were just tolerating me. Waiting for me to leave. But now I know. Sometimes people laugh because they're happy. Sometimes they don't say anything because they're shy. Sometimes a silence is just a pause. not a punishment. And sometimes, we blame others for what we fear in ourselves. One time in high school, I told a joke during lunch. Everyone laughed, except one guy. He stared at me like I'd said something offensive. That look haunted me for years. I thought I had crossed the line. But now I remember. He liked the same girl I was talking to. She had laughed a little too hard. And that wasn't my fault. But I took his look as proof that I was wrong. Unwanted. Too much. Looking back, I realize how many moments I gave away. How many times I silenced myself. Because of one look, one laugh, one assumption. I left too soon. I didn't trust the moment enough to stay. To breathe. To ask. To observe. Now, I'm starting to stay. Not because I'm trying to prove anything. But because I finally want to know what's real. Not just what I fear. What if, for all these years, I was never actually excluded? What if I was the one who walked out? Before anyone had the chance to say, "Hey, we're glad you came." Chapter 3: First Days and Ghost Memories. Some of the most powerful lies we carry don't come from other people. They're born in quiet moments. When we're too young to know how to interpret silence. I remember my first day of elementary school. I had new shoes, a backpack that felt too big, and a heart full of hope and fear. I walked into the classroom and saw everyone already seated, laughing in clusters like they'd always known each other. Nobody looked at me. Nobody called me over. So I sat in the back. And the whisper started. "They don't like you. You're too late. You're not part of this." But now, I wonder, what if they were just nervous too? What if they had no idea what to say to a new kid either? Children don't always know how to include. Sometimes they freeze. Sometimes they test. Sometimes they simply wait. But I didn't wait. I decided, on my own, that I didn't belong. And I started writing stories inside my head. Stories where I was the outsider. Stories where everyone else was part of something I couldn't access. No one told me that. No one needed to. I believed it so deeply that I started acting it out. Later, in middle school, I remember walking into the cafeteria and looking for a seat. That moment of scanning tables. The terror of not being invited to any of them. Even when someone waved, I'd hesitate. What if they were waving at someone behind me? Better to pretend I didn't see. Better to sit alone. Than to sit down and realize I wasn't wanted. I see now that I wasn't just afraid of rejection. I was addicted to the idea that rejection was inevitable. It became safer to assume I was excluded than to risk discovering that I had been included all along. That kind of fear becomes a habit. You stop asking questions. You stop checking your assumptions. You just shrink. But something inside me, even back then, was watching. A small, patient version of myself that kept whispering a different truth. Not the old whisper of fear, but something gentler. Stay a little longer this time. Maybe they're just quiet too. You belong, even if no one says it out loud. Now, as an adult, I look back at that little boy. I don't feel pity. I feel love. He tried so hard to protect himself. He carried too much responsibility for things that weren't his. He made himself invisible because no one ever told him he could shine. So now, I tell him he can sit wherever he wants. That he doesn't need to wait for permission to feel included. That his presence isn't a problem. It's a gift. And those memories? They were never ghosts. They were mirrors, waiting to be seen again with new eyes. Chapter 4: When they actually didn't like me. Let's be honest. Not all of it was in my head. Some people really didn't like me. They didn't want me there. And sometimes, they were right. There were moments when I walked into a space without reading it first. Times I spoke too much. Times I made things about me without meaning to. I was unaware. Just trying to connect. But connection without awareness can come off as noise. And sometimes I was the noise. I remember walking into a rehearsal space once. I was excited. I had my guitar, my smile, my good intentions. One of the guys looked me up and down and said, "This is for the scheduled performers only." I was one of them. But in that moment, I felt like a mistake. And I almost reacted. I almost said, "I have every right to be here." I've said things like that before. Firm. Defensive. Correct. And every time I did, I won the sentence. But lost the room. That day, I tried something else. I smiled and said, All good. I'm just here to support. If anything I do doesn't vibe, let me know and I'll adjust." He nodded. The air softened. We moved on. No tension. No friction. And by the end, we were talking like friends. That's when it hit me. He hadn't needed a fight. He needed to know I wasn't there to take. Just to add. And I needed that reminder too. Because some people really didn't like me in the past. Not because I was bad. But because I was unaware. And that's why today, I pay attention. That awareness. It started from being hurt. From not being wanted. But it doesn't need to stay as a wound. It can become refinement. It can become presence. Now I walk into spaces and feel. What's going on here? What's needed? Is there room for me to bring something kind, something useful? And when I do that, I'm almost always received. Even by people who, at first, might have resisted me. Because peace disarms more than argument. And true presence doesn't demand space. It creates it. That's the difference between wanting to be right and choosing to be welcome. Chapter 5. The Art of Responding Softly. Something changed in me. The moment I stopped needing to be understood right away. I used to explain myself a lot. Over-clarify. Defend. Correct people's tone or assumptions. Even when it wasn't necessary. I thought that was honesty. I thought that was strength. But the more I listened, the more I realized. Sometimes the strongest response is a soft one. One afternoon, I was sitting at a cafe with a small speaker playing low. A guy at the next table muttered loud enough for me to hear. "Some people think the whole street wants to hear their music." Old me would have fired back. I would have said something clever. Something justified. Instead, I turned to him, smiled, and said, "You're right. I'll turn it off." And I did. He looked surprised. Not smug. Just caught off guard. A few minutes later, he asked what I had been playing. We ended up talking about music. That conversation would have never happened if I had chosen to be right instead of being open. I started to understand. Softness is not submission. It's direction. It's choosing peace without abandoning yourself. When you meet someone's tension with calm, you create space for both of you to breathe. And over time, I saw how that choice changed everything. People who once seemed distant or reactive began to relax around me. Some even came closer. Not because I was trying to please them, but because I wasn't adding to the noise. I became someone people felt safe near. Even if they didn't know why. It wasn't about agreeing with everyone. It was about not needing to fight. To stay true to myself. And what surprised me most was how good it felt. To not be drained. To not walk away replaying every word I said. To respond, not react. There's an art to that. Not everyone sees it. But those who do, they feel it. And once you feel it, you don't want to live any other way. Chapter 6. Circles of Affinity. I used to believe I needed to fit in everywhere. Like it was a sign of being a good person. Someone easy to like, easy to include. But the more I tried, the more I disappeared. There were rooms where I spoke. And it felt like no one really heard me. Not because they were cruel, but because we simply weren't aligned. They were on one frequency, and I was on another. and I kept twisting myself to match something that didn't fit. One day, I left a gathering early, not out of rejection, but because I finally understood something. I don't need to force connection. I just need to feel when it's real. I started paying attention to the moments that felt light, to the people who made me feel calm, without trying, to the circles where I didn't have to prove I had a place. And slowly, I began to find what I call my circles of affinity. People whose rhythm matches mine. Conversations that breathe. Silences that don't feel heavy. And just as importantly, I learned to bless the places where I don't belong. And move on. Not everything is a rejection. Sometimes it's just redirection. And when I stopped resisting that, life got simpler. Softer. Some rooms I now enter just to offer something kind. Then leave. I don't always need to stay. Some connections are brief, but they can still be meaningful. A smile to a stranger. A quiet presence in the right moment. A word that lands without knowing why. I'm not everywhere anymore. But wherever I am, I'm whole. And that's the difference. When you stop begging to belong and start trusting your alignment, you begin to attract the kind of space that welcomes the real you. No performance, no adjusting. Just presence. Just flow. I don't need to be in every circle. I just need to recognize the ones where my soul can breathe. Chapter 7. Purpose over approval. I used to enter spaces trying to read the room. What do they expect? How do I not offend? What version of me will make this smoother? But eventually, I asked a different question. What if it's not about fitting the room, but understanding whether the room fits me? That changed everything. Because to answer that, I had to know who I was. And that didn't start in my thoughts. It started in my body. In how I breathed when no one was watching. In the way my shoulders tensed when I felt unseen. In the little voice that told me to choose slower, to sit straighter, to listen to my thirst instead of ignoring it. Even brushing my teeth, I started noticing which side I neglected. I became aware of how I swallowed, how I walked, how I stood. Not to be perfect, but to be present, to know what I need. I had to meet myself again, with care, with curiosity, with time. And once I started refining my habits, everything else became clearer. I didn't need to seek belonging. I just needed to honor rhythm. My own first. When I do that, I don't barge into spaces anymore. I glide. I listen before I speak. I feel the tone before I contribute. And most of the time, I'm received. Not because I asked to be, but because I already accepted myself before I arrived. It's no longer about being liked. It's about being aligned. And when I live that way, I feel like water, filling the space that welcomes me, and quietly flowing past the ones that don't. Not with bitterness, with peace. Because I know who I am now, and I like where this is going. Chapter 8. The door was always open. All this time, I thought I was waiting for permission to enter, to belong, to be seen. But the truth is, the door was never locked. I just never turned the handle from the inside. Now I walk with presence. I speak from within. And I don't ask the world to complete me. I let it receive what I already am. That changed everything. Because when you start honoring who you are, you don't force space. You create harmony. And it begins with the simplest things. With a glass of water placed under the morning sun. With your breath slowing down. While you pour that water into the roots of a plant you chose to care for. You watch it change. You watch yourself change. Because the same attention that heals a plant is the same attention that heals you. If there's a link to that process, to that quiet revolution, you might find it in the first line of this description. Maybe it's already available. Maybe not yet. If not, trust that the universe is still aligning what's needed. for your new season to begin. And if it is there, if your heart feels it, then follow it. Let that water begin something in you. Not later. Now.